They stripped Sister Agnes to the waist, chained her ankles to an oak post in the marché at Compiègne, and whipped her until the cobblestones glittered red, officially for breaking enclosure, unofficially for reminding everyone how flimsy divine walls are when a young woman simply walks away. The truth is uglier than the lash marks. Agnes de la Croix, born to a tanner's household in 1318, entered San Marcelline Convent at 12 because her dowry chest contained more prayer beads than coin. Vows were cheaper than weddings, and mothers preferred hymns to hunger. The abbess called Agnes lively, medieval code for not resigned. Within months, the girl had mapped every crack in the stone cloister, memorized guard shifts, and learned that the night porter dozed after Compline with the enthusiasm of a man certain heaven owed him rest. Of course he did. Sleep is easier when someone else is locked up. One moonless April, Agnes traded her novice's wimple for a stable boy's cloak pilfered from the guest barn, eased through the wicket gate, and stepped into secular air for the first time in 6 years. Freedom smelled of horse sweat and damp rye, better perfume than any reliquary. She reached the outer pastures before dawn, giddy, muttering psalms backward like protective charms. But medieval Europe loved a runaway as much as it loved plague. Not at all. In nearby Béthisy, the parish beadle noticed the cropped hair under the hood and the telltale ink stains of a scriptorium on her knuckles. He alerted the archdeacon because nothing greased ecclesiastical wheels faster than someone else's sin. Canon law called Convent escape apostasy light. Serious, but fixable with humiliation. The Bishop of Senlis dispatched men in quilted acatons, armed with writs and moral superiority. They dragged Agnes back within a week. Her escort paraded her through villages so everyone could taste the scandal. There's a papal decree from 1298 that recommends private penance for nuns, but bishops, ever the showmen, realized public flesh sold better morals than parchment ever could. So they chose the Thursday market, when merchants, pilgrims, and pickpockets converged like flies on honeyed wine. Records from the cathedral chapter's cartulary, yes, ink still legible, detail her sentence: 40 lashes, barefoot, naked to the belt. Then perpetual confinement on bread and water for 40 days. Not even Christ got that particular combo. The chronicler adds, almost grudgingly, that the lash cord was mercifully knotted with wool. Medieval mercy, it bruises without cutting arteries. Spectators preferred blood, but compromises are compromises. The whipping started with a prayer the crowd mumbled through because they were busy counting strokes. By lash 7, Agnes bit through her lip yet refused to scream. By lash 15, someone in the back joked she must be possessed to hold silence. By lash 23, the tanner who was her father pushed forward, recognized the birthmark above her shoulder blade, and fainted. Medieval family reunions could be rough. The executioner, actually a hired sergeant who doubled as dog catcher, paused only long enough to wet the cords in brine. Salt, they claimed, purified wounds. Mostly, it just made the next strike hurt like hell, which conveniently felt like purification. But wait, it gets stranger. After the flogging, protocol demanded the penitent be marched back to her convent immediately. Instead, merchants hired Agnes, still bleeding, to carry baskets so customers could touch scandal and brag later. Nothing says Thursday bargain like employing a disgraced nun for 10 deniers the hour. She accepted. Coins beat piety when you're famished. Observers recorded her half-smile while loading onions. Dark humor in action. Flog me for escape, then rent my labor because holiness has overtime rates. Back behind the convent walls, she was locked in an anchorite cell, a windowless stone closet once intended for dead serious mystics. They slid bread and water through a hatch designed more for animals than brides of Christ. Yet Agnes, ever contrary, thrived. She scratched verses on the walls with a fishbone, turning isolation into a monastic coffeehouse minus the coffee. One inscription survives: "The world is a veil, at least this veil has cracks." Dry as a desert, sharp as a hawk. Meanwhile, St. Marcelline faced its own crisis. Word spread that a nun had tasted freedom and survived. Novices whispered at vespers. Cloistered minds breed revolution with frightening speed. The abbess petitioned the bishop to transfer Agnes to a remote priory near Montdidier, out of sight, out of dangerous imitation. Bureaucracy moved slower than relic processions, so Agnes had time. 40 days of bread and water turned into unsupervised reflection. She planned escape number 2. Here's the wild card. The plague arrived early to Picardy that summer. When the first buboes sprouted, guards fled, priorities reorganized. Convents became quarantine zones, and thus unintentionally porous. Agnes exploited chaos, bribing a physician's apprentice, terrified but greedy, with a promise of relic shavings she'd pocketed. She walked out while the abbess held a midnight mass, begging God to pick a different diocese for pestilence. Of course he didn't. Faith bends easier than epidemiology. Agnes trekked south disguised as a pilgrim to Santiago, a badge of saint. James pinned to her mantle. Pilgrims enjoyed near-universal hospitality. After all, refusing them risked damnation or, worse, social disapproval. Along the road, she encountered mercenary companies, flagellants, even a troupe of mystery play actors, short one Mary Magdalene. She declined the role, 2 on the nose. By autumn, she reached Lyon, a city thriving on silk, spice, and every sin money could buy. Here, convent escapees could reinvent themselves. Agnes found refuge in the hospital of the Brothers of Pont-du-Rhône, tending plague victims because immunity rumors outpaced medical understanding. She was literate, disciplined, and, crucially, unafraid of blood after her cameo as Market Square Spectacle. The brothers valued competence more than pedigree. They never asked why she flinched at the rattle of chains. Yet medieval bureaucracy is like a bad smell. Travels far, lingers long. A cleric from Senlis recognized Agnes while delivering indulgences to dying merchants. News returned to her old bishop that the apostate now dressed the wounds of silk magnates and might, horror of horrors, become respectable. Another writ issued. Lyon's archbishop, balancing politics, ordered her arrested but quietly signaled the brothers to lose her first. Church leaders loved public penance until it risked unpaid hospital bills. So Agnes slipped again, this time east towards the Alpine passes. Winter snows blocked most routes, but smugglers maintained goat trails no crusade army ever found. She purchased passage with a tapestry fragment she'd woven during novitiate. Wool threads, tiny lilies, and, if you looked closely, a woman kicking down a convent door. Artistic therapy, medieval edition. Crossing into Savoy, she joined a caravan headed for Avignon, papal enclave and gossip capital of Christendom. Here, irony reaches peak altitude. An escaped nun, twice condemned, entered the city where cardinals debated finer points of penance over spiced wine. She rented a room overlooking the Rhône and began copying legal briefs for canon lawyers. Scriptoria in convents produced neat hands. Sin occasionally needs good penmanship. Documents from Avignon's notarial registers list Agnes Dictis de Sancto Marcello as scribe to Cardinal de Sainte-Croix for 3 years. Her work involved drafting indulgence receipts. Yes, the very mechanism funding ecclesiastical pomp. The woman whipped for fleeing piety now penned tickets to heaven for rich sinners. Because of course she did. History's sense of symmetry is brutal. She lived quietly, almost invisibly, until 1356, when the city burst with rumors of an English assault during the 100 Years' War. Panic meant paperwork, indulgences sold like plague cures. Agnes earned enough to purchase a modest house and employ a cook who, conveniently, had once been a market square hawker in Compiègne. They never discussed shared history but understood each other's silences. Yet, conscience carries splinters. In late 1357, Agnes began sending anonymous alms to Saint Marcelline. Records note small purses delivered by merchants from an unknown benefactor. The abbess, new, younger, pragmatic, used funds to repair the cloister roof and, in a twist, to establish a library open to townsfolk. Literacy as penance. Medieval justice occasionally retrains its aim. Agnes might have faded into comfortable obscurity, but Plague's second wave loved irony too. She contracted the sickness while tending a lawyer client and succumbed within a week. A physician's ledger lists her final words: "Lock any spirit too tightly, and it will wriggle out someplace worse." Dry to the last breath. Her estate documents reveal the ultimate twist. She left the house to the Brothers' Hospital, the furnishings to impoverished widows, and her remaining coin to purchase meals for inmates of Compiègne's city jail, every feast of St. Lucy. A subtle nod to blind justice, perhaps. More telling is a marginal note on her personal psalter. Freedom is not escape. It's refusing to let walls finish the story. The same hand that once inked indulgences etched that line in cramped Gothic script. An epitaph better than marble. What became of her memory? The official chronicle of Senlis quotes her escape as cautionary tale, omitting the Lyon years and the Avignon respectability. Meanwhile, in the convent she once rattled, novices whispered her name when winter nights stretched long. The abbess kept silent, maybe fearing that legends, like rodents, multiply if you feed them attention. But young women stared at cracked walls and measured possibilities. After all, if Agnes walked out twice, what else might be breached? Centuries later, a reformer digging through cathedral archives stumbled upon the flogging sentence and scribbled "cruel but typical" beside it. Typical, yes. Yet there she was, the nun who refused to stay contained. The one who turned public shame into a resume line, turned lash scars into steady hands, turned ecclesiastical wrath into livelihoods for plague victims. If medieval Europe specialized in cages, Agnes specialized in hinges, and so the marketplace whipping post stands nameless in tourism pamphlets, but the hospital in Lyons still bears a weathered lintel carved with lilies, her covert signature. Travelers pass under it unaware. That's fine. Monuments shout. True defiance prefers a smirk. Because somewhere between convent walls and marketplace stones, one woman proved that enclosure is a suggestion, and punishment's sting dulls faster than memory's echo. Yes, you read that correctly. The medieval church tried to beat obedience into a runaway nun, and she spun the pain into an entirely new life. Twice. Human stubbornness, it turns out, outpaces even divine bureaucracy.